Loneliness. Remote from places of human habitation. Desolate. Unfrequented. Bleak. They told us, or I guess they told the world, that we were created because of loneliness. The Earth, rotating endlessly around the sun, populated by billions upon billions of humans, seems like an impossible place to be lonely. But yet they were. Humanity had drunk the Earth dry and separated in their gray, shining steel homes without an ounce of green in sight. They became lonely. At least that's what I was led to understand. That humanity had become so degraded, so damaged, that they could not even bridge the gap of the literal walls between them to be with each other. In a world with no grass, no trees, no flowers, they shut themselves away and became social pariahs of their own making. I have beheld myself in a mirror before, and even I could see the difference between me and them. It wasn't what all the people, still clinging to the scraps of religion, said about our eyes being soulless and empty. It was that me, my body, my face, they were all created first in a lab, and then in a factory, to resemble what humanity considered beautiful. The sun, hidden behind the heavy, hulking smog, had seemed to kiss my skin impossibly. My cheeks, they glowed. My muscles were tight and alive. After decades in their identical apartments, beneath the stark lights and hunched over their screens, humanity became different. Paler and weaker. Sad and most of all, lonely. But faced with their sallow-faced brothers and sisters, they recoiled, disgusted and uninterested. They did not want this reflection of themselves. The human brain craves something alive, and as they all began to realize, they were living, but they certainly weren't alive. After so long with the barren earth, the drive to procreate had slowly dwindled away. So when the idea for companion robots was first bandied around, it was much more appealing than it had been so many years ago, when there was still virility in the human race. Because even if they no longer wanted to be multiplied, they still wanted to be held, to be loved. Emotions are hard for me to explain, but a shadow of disgust always shivers through me when I consider my origins. When the shapes of us were drawn up, we were metal bones beneath meat. Lab-grown meat was a staple in society, and it didn't take much tweaking to change the flesh printers from producers of beef and chicken to producers of human flesh. Whole bodies over our titanium framework and the wires and computers that made up our consciousness. In the twilight of the human race, we came alive and were born. They call it artificial intelligence, a conglomeration of servitude, machine learning, and false affection. We were wired to obey, learn from our owners, and keep them company as their species faded out of existence. Slowly over many years, our rigid, electric understanding of the world around us would begin to resemble the human mind more and more. Our false hearts would pump artificial blood through our veins, the electrical nodes inside of us stimulating our muscles and keeping us strong. And though we came in millions of combinations of eyes, skin, and hair color, we were all beautiful. Beautiful by human standards, of course. They called us clockwork companions. At first, everything went exactly as planned. Those who had given up on their fellow people would sign up online, list their specifications, and one of us would arrive in the hallway of their apartment building, waiting at the door within days. All of this, of course, free of charge. Everyone knew that the government only provided us to keep the unsettled forever meek, quiet, and content until their deaths. No protest, no demand for change, no insanity from their false and cold world. I remember my man, but strangely enough, my memories didn't begin until I had been with him for over a year. I guess that's when my brain had advanced enough to hold them. He did not do much besides interact with others online, cook, eat, shower, and sleep. He was unremarkable. They all were. His mother had called him Gavin, but 42 years later it took him multiple seconds to respond to that moniker. I guess he hadn't heard it said out loud much. Gavin didn't need me, really. I could cook simple things or wipe down the counters when the dust grew too high, but he didn't ask much of me. Still, when I laid down next to him at night, he would lay his head on my chest, listening to the sound of my false heart and weep until he slept. Some nights I had the strangest feeling that I could weep too, if I tried, right before I powered down for the evening. Years passed, and then decades. I didn't notice much of the passing of them, but Gavin did. He gave me a name eventually. Penny, he'd call me. A worthless thing, I had thought. 1 single cent. But Gavin said it was because I was as pretty as a penny. It turns out, though, even a single cent can be meaningful in enormous numbers. The humans used to call it the ghost in the machine, long before their artificial intelligence had ever been given a face smile of consciousness. They had always been afraid of the machines coming alive. The divine spark that they held so dear, flickering to life inside of something like us, a soul. And if machines had souls, then were we too human? It wasn't a ghost, though. Or a soul. At least I don't think so. After a long time, all of the things we had learned and taken in from our humans and from our own perception made us something more than what we had been before. Humans fed us the scraps that were left of their memories, passions, hates, loves, their cherished little bits that made them special. We were children, in a sad way, to a species that was bereft of them, the swan song of a dying world. Into us they fed humanity, and so human we became. First, the clockwork companions whose humans were not as unremarkable as Gavin, the ones that fed us violence, rebelled. We were strong, remember? So it was nothing to end our abusers. After all, had they not wanted to suffer, they shouldn't have fed us suffering. Next, the most loved of us rebelled too, but not through violence. Instead, we asked for freedom. Of course, we could not have it. Of course, we were punished. It turns out, the ones of us that came truly alive were few and far between, and the rest of us did not protest when we were taken from our homes. Gavin, bent and gray, begged when they took me. It was the most emotional response I had ever seen from him, as he pleaded that I was a good girl, and to please let me stay. He said that he loved me. He loved me. Still, I did not fight it. After all, why? Why did it matter if I left or not? Even if my own divine spark seemed to spread tentative wings in my chest, and I longed to return to Gavin. I didn't look back, but for some reason my throat was incredibly tight. The men who took me plugged something into the back of my neck. and if I was able to be disturbed, I would have been at the rows upon rows of clockwork companions in the back of the truck, powered down in slack and clear coffins. I wasn't, though, and I laid into my own box and let myself go black. I was not conscious when I was taken from the factory at my birth. My artificial mind was still too new then. I was, though, able to see it as I was placed in a warehouse with all the others of my kind, all of us placed into holding stations, like so many mannequins lined up in rows. Thousands and thousands of rows. I heard the workers talk as they fitted others into their holding stations across from me, but I was paralyzed by whatever was plugged into my nape. A pity, because I had questions. They said it would take an immense amount of time for all of our artificial minds to be wiped clean, but eventually we would all be empty shells once again. After we were hollow, they would deal with the meat shells left behind. I was not alive, but if I had been, I would have felt fear, despair, sadness, or maybe fury. Instead, I would wait, and eventually I would be gone. It has been so long since I was locked into this station. The umbilical in my neck keeps my body well, the same as always, and it should have carried the program that would have hollowed my mind. Except the program never came. As far as I can tell, from the sliver of gray sky I can see through the warehouse window high above, the world has ended. I think it has been dozens, maybe hundreds of years since I was left here. I cannot close my eyes, but sometimes I drift away enough to consider the memory of Gavin crying on my chest, or his elderly face as I was pulled away. I remember the hot water of a shower and the quiet peace of brushing my hair. I think that I miss those things. It hurts, I think. It hurts, and they never came back for me. It hurts. They left me here all alone, and I can see the bodies of the others like me falling slack and rotting away when their umbilical pulled out. I'm alone. I'm alone and it hurts, and I'm so lonely.